Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Big Life. I am here with, of course, as always, Miss Jordyn Wickus, but recently on Michigan State's #1 ranked team in the country. Jordyn, the rankings come out typically after we record the podcast, so we didn't get to talk about this last week, but last week it came out Michigan State ranked #1 in the country for college women's soccer. How does it feel?
It feels absolutely incredible. I mean, like, we've talked about the journey throughout all of this, and the change I've been able to be a part of and see this program have is really incredible. And I think I wish I had it that I could look it up or see the exact number, but we were well within the 200s when I committed and was looking at Michigan State here. So to go from that and to really have such a dramatic turnaround in such a short period of time where, you know, even if it is short-lived, I don't expect them to remain the same for this week. Unfortunately, we did have two ties after that ranking, but it's an incredible feeling, and it's so amazing to have that. Even though, we've said it before, the only ranking that matters is the one at the end of the season. To still have that recognition at this point is so amazing for this team, and even more amazing for the people who are here before us in my freshman and sophomore year that really helped change this program around and rebuild it to what it is today.
I gotta ask, the rankings come out. I'm sure the buzz was going off in the team group chats, people sending it. But what was Jeff's message to the team, and how did your team talk about it and address something as monumental as this, but also you don't want to get caught up in it? So what was that balance like?
Yeah, so we practice at like 3 p.m., which is right around when the rankings come out. So we had a nice little like team gathering. Jeff's ready for our pre-practice kind of speech, whatever practice plan. And, he pulls us all in and he's like, starts giving this speech. And we're like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? And he tells us like in person that we're #1. And I think the initial reaction, like he had to tell us again, because I think our initial reaction was just pure shock that we didn't really get to express the kind of like excitement for it at first. Cause we were just, I think, all really surprised to be in that position. But he was, I think his messaging was similar to your question, where it was like, while this is super exciting, there is still more work to be done and we do still have to go out and continue to get results. I want you guys to acknowledge this and enjoy the process of it, enjoy your recognition. However, don't get too tied up in it. And I think his biggest message was, I don't want you to play scared to lose it. If we go out and we drop the ball, we're not going to win or lose, a conference title or a national title in the next week here. So he didn't want us to go out and kind of play like we were protecting that, like we had something to lose. And, I think it was just like a moment of really recognizing how far this program has come for everyone from his side as well. Cause, he's the one who did this and changed it. So it was a very, very cool moment. And I think, like I said, the initial excitement was just pure shock that we've come this far.
No, that's totally cool. I know, like, when I saw it come up on my phone, I was just like, that, like you said, it's not the Michigan State I played against my freshman year, and to see the change. And I think we definitely have to get Jeff back on the pod to kind of talk about what it's meant to him and the journey. But it has been an adventure, I know, and I know it's been a pleasure to see it kind of on a personal basis and for all of our viewers. So we're also happy for y'all and continuing to root on. It's a great milestone. And on top of this, there's other big moments in the big life to get to, but that was the big one. We had to shout it out from the beginning. You did say two ties. Let's go into the weekend. How did the weekend go for you guys? How did you feel going into the weekend?
Yeah, I think it was a tough week for us. It's definitely not the results we wanted going out. We played at that point, we were #1. Ohio State was ranked #11. We went to Ohio State and we ended up walking away with a tie. And I think it's just, tying, I feel like is almost harder than winning or losing. Like it's just, you kind of walk off and the game just kind of like ends at the clock and no one's really happy. No one's really like knows what to do with it. I think it's exciting to see how far we've come as a program where a tie does feel like a loss and how much that means to us and the standard we hold ourselves to. I think it was a very good game. Do I think we should have walked away with the win? Absolutely. I think we had every opportunity possible and we need to figure out a way to get it done in those crucial minutes. And then turning around to Rutgers, which is right now leading the conference in terms of their standings and their record. We play them at home, and they've only let in 2 goals the entire season up until our game. We had put the third away against them, scored. We were up 1-0 until the last, like, I don't know, 4 minutes. And unfortunately, we had another handball in the box, giving them a last minute PK. Felt very similar to Xavier, and, you know, walk away with the tie. That one was still leaves a sour taste in our mouth because we had that one in the bag, and to have such a last minute unfortunate PK to give them again after already doing it against Xavier in our non-conference play was not what we wanted. So we are regrouping and moving forward to now playing our most talked about team, Michigan, Saturday for the nice rivalry. Saturday, 7 p.m. game, which should be a good crowd. And it's always an incredible environment to be a part of.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Like you said, you go in with the highs of the week being ranked number one and then two unfortunate ties. And now I get what you mean in the sense of like, I feel like ties have the potential to feel like wins or losses. And on my side of it, I know my last 2 games have actually been ties as well. And one of them, we were down 2-0, scrappy comeback fight. We tie it to get in like the 94th minute to tie 2-2. You leave that game feeling like that tie's a win, you know? Then this one, once again, this week, we went down early, came back and tied it, but we had every chance in the world to win the game. And so it's like, I feel like ties can either be kind of like wins and kind of like losses as well.
Absolutely. You said 94th minute. You play overtime?
Not overtime, but like extra stoppage time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like the rest of the world. That was one of the weird adjustments going to pro was, in college, you don't do stoppage time. Obviously, the clock stops when there's goals or injuries or stuff like that. But there's no actual like additional time. So now, like, as someone trying to control a game and know the scenario, you're in the 89th minute, you're no longer really like holding out. We have seconds to win. You have to wait for the referee to hold up that there's 7 minutes of stoppage time and stuff like that going on, which can sometimes feel like a dream and other times feel like your biggest nightmare.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that because we were looking at like playtime the other day and whatever, and it was how much time the ball actually spends out of bounds for every throw in and every corner kick and every time at the end when the goalie falls on the ball. I like you play a true 90. It's got to feel way different than college because I mean we probably play 80 minutes in theory, like
guess.
minutes
Yeah.
go, yeah.
I would definitely guess. Yeah, adding stoppage time, that was one of the things I think I underestimated the most going into pro, and it definitely it catches up to you pretty quick.
I can imagine.
All right. And with other big moments in the big life, last week we shouted out, of course, Michigan State, but also Iowa for being unbeaten throughout this year. You guys added 2 more ties and got to give to Iowa. They added 2 more wins with a big upset, a lot would say. At home, they beat Penn State 2-1. That was a crazy game. Penn State scores in the first minute of the game. And then Iowa comes back and scores 2 by the 14th minute. So 3 goals scored in the first 14 minutes and then shut out the rest of the game. So Iowa wins at home there and then wins on the road at Northwestern. So Iowa and Michigan State are the 2 unbeaten teams in the Big Ten, which is still, I got to say, it's because of us.
Absolutely. We take full credit for this. 100%. It has nothing to do with anything else. It is purely the Big Life podcast controlling this narrative.
And then on top of that, you already mentioned it. Rutgers, let in 3 goals this entire season so far. One of them being to Michigan State, but clearly starting off with one of the top defenses in the country. They've really shown that aspect of their game that they're willing to defend. And that's something that I wouldn't really say was a characteristic of Rutgers a couple years ago. So I think it's something really cool that they seem to be really developing over in New Jersey over there.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a different Rutgers than we've been used to the last couple of years. And, they find ways to get it done. And now they're in the front of the conference. And, it's really up to them to either drop the ball in terms of a result here for the rest of us to be in the running.
Yeah, and they aren't alone. They have 3 other teams joining them that are 4-0-1. So Rutgers, Iowa, UCLA, and USC are all 4-0-1 in Big Ten play. So those 4 teams are sitting up there tied for first place as we start discussing what can go into the Big Ten tournament.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we did get a little bit more information as to what that looks like. I think there's still some meetings that need to be had to figure out real logistics of it as we get closer to that kind of postseason mark. But the big thing being that the amount of teams that get entered have changed for the Big Ten tournament, allowing you now to have a possibility for a first round bye. So if you are ranked some of those top teams going into the tournament, you may not have to play that first round. So first, second, and third round will all be in Minnesota, and then the fourth round and final will be in Maryland at Audi Field. So it's a five game tournament, which is way different than I think what we're used to, but it is all going to be at Minnesota and then Maryland for those 5 rounds, which previous years it was at Columbus for the last 2 years, and then before that it was the top ranked team hosted the entire tournament. So a little bit different there, and obviously different with how many teams are allowed in it.
I think that having the bye adds an interesting factor. I know that other conference tournaments do something similar, like the SEC, I believe, has like a play-in aspect or a bye aspect. And a 5 game tournament's a different animal. I mean, if you look at the Big Ten tournament in years past, it's been 3 games. I can think about our pathway last year, and you win 3 games and you're the Big Ten champion, which I've always thought felt kind of weird. And so I think extending it, is interesting. And then you have to think about the placement. I think Minnesota just feels a little bit random that Minnesota's hosting first. That's great, but odd. And then playing out in Maryland when you have teams likely from both coasts. And so I'm a little bit surprised it's not a little bit more centrally located, but Audi Field, of course, professional environment, both the Washington Spirit and DC Power play there. So that's going to be a really cool environment to be able to play in.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree that having a 5 game tournament, it gives you, I think, a better gauge of the best team coming out of it after 5 games, where 3 games you can go on a run or have a streak or something like that.
Whoa. Are we talking about the streak last year? I don't really know. I think there's nothing wrong with a good Cinderella streak, but
Well, now you just got to do it 2 more games. You just got to hang in there 2 more games. But yeah, I think it gives you a more well-balanced look, and especially coming off of such an unbalanced conference schedule where we don't play so many teams this season, I think it does give you a good gauge going into the NCAA tournament of who the best teams really are between conference play and the tournament.
yeah, I think that's a really, really crucial point. Is I've been looking at Big Ten schedules and talking about it here and there with certain people, and it is just insane that now that there's 18 teams in the conference, the amount of teams that you don't play. And so when it comes to that regular season title that used to, frankly, have so much weight to it, I feel like that weight does get taken away when you don't play almost half the teams in the conference. It feels very unbalanced. And so I think that extending the tournament, opening it up a bit does, like you said, make a true winner instead of, well, they didn't play this person or this person and they had this person at home instead of on the road. So, the question mark factors that I feel like can definitely be thrown into a conversation for an argument about who's truly the strongest team out of the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised that they are still having a normal conference champion even because it's so unbalanced. I know there was talks about getting rid of that, but I'm happy they still have it. I would speculate that this would be the last year, though, unless they split up with the speculation of more teams joining the Big Ten Conference, unless they do kind of like divisions or something like that, that this would be the last year for normal conference champion.
Yeah, the ultimate question was, I know rumors, clearly it hasn't gone to this, but the rumors were that soccer could almost turn into the football aspect of Big Ten East and Big Ten West. And so I do feel like having those, aspects could make it interesting when you have like 2 sides and then they play off. And so there's so much going on, but I'm happy at least it's October, now, and we actually have an answer to what's going to happen at the end of October for the tournament, because normally the first round of the tournament's played around Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy just how much things change and how quickly they change and how little us as players know. And even moving forward, how little the coaching staff appears to know for some of these things. They don't want to tell us all this information because it has constantly been changing and evolving throughout the process of it all. So it's been a really weird year to kind of just sit here, and a lot of it is just speculating on what's going to happen. But it does feel good to finally get some answers about what postseason's going to look like for us and the reality of it. Because at the end of the day, you're chasing to be the best in every aspect: conference tournament, and the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Well, Jordyn, that is it for our big moments in the big life. And I am extremely excited to get into a kind of a discussion with you and a little bit of background. When Jordyn and I kind of talk about like what topics we want to hit on the podcast or different things, we talk about, what's going on in our lives. What are we feeling, and kind of connecting that to each other. And I told Jordyn that I'm not going to give her a lot of information about what I want to talk about because I want her raw reactions as we get into this conversation. So, little warning, but I'm gonna toss you a little warm-up question as we get into this, Jordyn. At this point in the season, if I were to look back at my college career, I think that this is the point where I get tired. Not only physically, But this is where school, maybe midterms really starts kicking in. You've been with each other nonstop. You're playing a lot of games. And this is when I would say personalities kind of become a big thing in the locker room. And sometimes you're like, I would like to get away from my teammates. I love my teammates. Like I feel like those 5-day trips by the end, I know I would like to never see some of my teammates again after them, and then of course I see them 2 days later and everything's fine. But how is it for you guys in the locker room right now, or your experience in college soccer when it comes to like this point of the season where you're kind of physically and emotionally and mentally starting to get a little bit fatigued and you're around each other nonstop?
Yeah, yeah, I do think this is definitely where true personalities come to shine, especially as you go throughout the season and you have to face that sort of adversity. It's really hard to put on, the perfect face and do all these things when things are going really well and we were at home for 9 games and winning and doing all these things. And once we started kind of traveling, you have the school aspect, you have this adversity of things not going our way now, the way they have necessarily for the rest of the season. It's definitely come to show some friction between some things. And that's not necessarily bad. I think it can go and you push each other to be the very best and hold each other accountable in ways that causes that. But I think it's definitely at that point in the season where like everyone's facing midterm week now, where we're just academically exhausted. And I think our cognitive function is lower than it probably normally is, having to focus on that and the physical buildup of just player load week after week after week after week. As someone who plays a high level of minutes, their bodies are fatiguing and you're starting to see that and feel that more. And I do think it comes to show different aspects of how people deal with that. Some people need just to sit in a corner and chill and have a break and like a meditation session before they can get back into things. Some people like to like talk it out and have that connection where they're, super chatty, and having to separate those personalities and learn the way everyone deals with that adversity is definitely something that's come into play this season. And I think we have a very new team, very unique team. There's a lot of players we haven't gotten the opportunity to really learn and dive into all of this yet because this is their first semester with us. So being able to navigate that and figure out what they need and what we can give them as teammates to help them be their best while still maintaining our own level of self. It's been definitely interesting to kind of navigate. And even as like a coaching staff, I think when you have so many different personalities, you're struggling to figure out what the motivation is for them. How do you get them to be fully bought in when you have some people that are motivated so polar opposite and differently? How do you navigate that and get everyone on the same page before games even?
Yeah. So this is exactly kind of the topic I want to talk about and kind of dive into your experiences with teammates with different personalities and overall, like as a player listening to this podcast, like what can you learn from that? And the reason this all started, so a little bit of backstory. I was doing a recovery session in the weight room yesterday, and I was with people that I would say here are like my closest circle. And one of the girls looked at me and we were talking about whatever. And she goes, Sam, I would have hated you if I met you 2 years ago. Just blatantly said that to my face. I was like, oh, okay. I don't really know how to take this information.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know if I've ever fully dealt with someone like you that I enjoyed being around. And I was like, once again,
Not helping.
I don't know how to take this information. And
Not helping.
we kind of started talking about, it is so fascinating to me about how personalities work. And the thing I still am yet to figuring out is as a team, theoretically, and in most situations, especially in a high level college and a professional environment, you have the same goals. You all want your team to be successful at the end of the day. Obviously, there's individual goals. Obviously, there's other factors, but you would love to believe, and I truly do believe, that everyone in my locker room wants this team to be as successful as possible. The weird thing that I like am learning and figuring out as I go and as I grow up is how different of a path and a map we all take to get to the same goal. And I know that that's like obvious. Like, of course, everyone thinks differently, does Sam? And we've even covered it on this podcast. We talked about Enneagrams about a year ago and personalities and things like that. But I'm learning that there's such a different level to it. And I don't think it's something I've really experienced until I've chose to dive in. And it got me thinking. I'm gonna go on my soapbox for a little bit. And I literally like this was keeping me up last night at like 1 in the morning. I was talking to Trey about this. Like, I have been labeled my whole life as a tryhard. Like that was like the first name I remember almost getting like bullied at when I was in middle school is that we would run this lap before gym every day in middle school and I would try to beat all the boys because I was a tryhard. And I think a lot of that is growing up. Like it's a little bit of nature and nurture. Like I'm sure it's in my blood and my DNA somewhere, but also like growing up, that's what my parents, kind of taught me. That's what I was praised for, rewarded for. And then as I was that try hard, for me, that's how I got results. That's how I got good at soccer. I genuinely do not know that I do not think, I pretty much know I would not be a professional player if I wasn't a try hard. I wasn't naturally talented or whatever. And by that, I mean like doing my own practice sessions, going to the gym, signing up, always being the one first in the door, just like little things like that. And I was talking to one of my teammates about this. And she looked at me and she goes, Sam, if I lived your life, I would be so exhausted. I would have quit soccer by the time I was 15. And it's interesting that she said that because she's a top level pro. She's played professional soccer for the last 7 years of her life. She's a fantastic player. She's on the Swedish national team. And I always thought, I was just raised to think that, I remember thinking when I went to college, everyone's going to be a tryhard. Everyone's going to be like me. Everyone's going to think like me. And I learned very quickly that wasn't true. And then I even kind of frankly, after I graduated college, now that I'm a pro, everyone's going to be like me. Everyone's going to be like this, try hard and go crazy. Also, I've learned that's not true. And I think it's just kind of opening my eyes to this perspective of I need to be a tryhard because that's what I need to do. And I am confident that that is what I need to do. And I really don't give two craps if you do that or don't, because you need to do what you need to do. But one of the most interesting things about developing as a soccer player is not doing what you think you should do or what other person's doing or what person B is doing or what your teammate's doing, but it's knowing what you need to do as a human. And I'm pretty sure my entire soccer career, I've just been figuring out what I need to do as a human to be successful in life and what that is for me and learning that. And I don't think I've understood that until I became 23. So that's a really big topic. And I know I just got on my soapbox a bit, but I guess what are your first impressions to thinking like that or anything, in that regard?
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting because I think growing up, I was definitely a try hard too in a lot of aspects where I always, I was super competitive, uber competitive, wanted to win, wanted to do all of the things. But I was never the kid who really I would always sign up for all the extra training sessions. I think a lot of it was naivety too. I didn't know other people were going out in their front yard and doing extra work. It wasn't part of my conversation with family or friends. No one around me was doing it. I didn't see it. I didn't even really know it was an option. And, I think I did a lot. I did 3 sports. I did extra sessions and all that. Not that I was a lazy kid by any means, but I wasn't necessarily a tryhard or the way I look at you, or I would say you're very similar to Justina Gaynor on our team, where they knew what to do. They're very technical and deliberate with the way they go about things in their life and all of it. And I thought that I would have been very behind because I didn't have that growing up when I got to college. And that everyone was going to be more similar to you and Justina. And that was the only way to have success, was to be like you and Justina. And that there was just this one path laid out, and I think the path we're all preached to is very similar to the one you thought where everyone takes. And I don't think I really realized until this year when we started having conversations about how big the soccer world is and how many opportunities there are, that there was a route for me to go ahead and do these things, because I'm not like you or Justina. I don't do or think about things the same way, where I feel like it's so deliberate. Every day, every decision you make is based off of this idea to achieve perfection as an athlete, and it's all consuming in that route.
Mm-hmm.
I think me and, Meg Hughes on our team are very similar, where we go around and you need to have some sort of separation from it, or, we approach training sessions or we approach games very, very differently. And I think we both had an extreme amount of success. And I didn't know that was a path. And I always felt like I was behind or missing something, or that there wasn't a route to really achieve that elite level for me because I was so different than I think the route everyone kind of preaches. So similar to what you're saying, but in a different aspect in the way I think it's impacted me in my career and my path and my ideas with how successful you can be without doing the same things that everyone else is doing, you know, and I think there really is only one way that everyone preaches for how it should be, which is the try hard, as you called it, aspect of the very deliberate, very all-consuming route that I think a lot of pros take. I do think it's probably easier to have success if you go that route because you've lived it your entire life and you've had this kind of straight line focus for what you want and what your desires are. But yeah, it took me a long time to figure out that's not the only route and that what I was doing wasn't lazy and that I wasn't a bad athlete and that I wasn't, you know, all of these negative things that I thought and that I didn't want it enough and you're questioning your love for the game because I just can't I don't work the same way. If I were to do the way you and Justina and Kelly Severini, who's listens to this podcast, hi Kelly. But if I were to function that way, I would burn out.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have the love or desire for the game I do. I couldn't function that way. And it took me forever to realize that that doesn't mean I'm a bad athlete. It just means I'm different than you guys.
See, that's exactly the point that I wanted to get to. So I'm very, like I said, I wouldn't do this without telling Jordyn anything, but I'm having this conversation and me and the girls that I'm having it with, who I would say are way more like you, Jordyn, than like me. And we start talking about first impressions and this idea of like, were your first impressions of the three of us that were having this conversation accurate? And one of the girls looked at me and she goes, "Oh, I knew everything I needed to know about you the first time I met you, Sam." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" And she was like, "You just like, I outwardly portray everything about myself. I think you could have coffee with me and immediately know that like, I am an extremely type A person. I like everything organized. I have every detail of my life planned. You know, soccer is everything to me. So like, I'm going to do everything to get there and boom. Like I am in a lot of regards that typical idea for success. And there's two parts of this I want to hit. Number one, for those of us like me, the people out there that are that typical, this is what we are preached to, because I would completely agree with you in that regard. It can be freaking lonely. I talked to Trey about this last night and I genuinely asked him, this man is my husband. Like, so I have to assume he likes being around me. But I asked him, I go, "Do you like the try hard aspect of me?" Because I can understand how being around me and how like some of my teammates, even frankly, being around me can find me exhausting. And I can also understand how parts of who I am can come off like I'm arrogant or like I'm a little cocky or like I kind of feel like I'm full of myself. And that's what this conversation went to, because one person said, "Yeah, I know everything I need to know about you." And the other girl looked at me dead in the face and goes, "Yeah, I thought I would hate you. I thought you were a bitch. I thought you were going to be cocky. I thought you were entitled." And it's kind of taken me knowing people and being so close to people that are so different than me. Because I think in my time in college, I had people that saw me and maybe even looked at me like, I'll just say it, like a role model. Once I became like a senior, a fifth year, a captain, I was the captain, but I was never the friend. I was the teammate, but I was never really a close friend. And I think people naturally push people like me away because we do have our stuff so figured out individualistically that it looks like we don't need other people. So that was my one experience, is I feel like it's extremely lonely and isolating because we can be exhausting to be around. And I'm aware of that. On the other hand, I can understand where I have been judgmental, where I have seen people and misjudged them. I can think about one of my best friends here. It has taken me a long time to be friends with her and understand that she's not lazy. And like, we had this conversation and I looked at her, I go, "I thought you were lazy." Because to me, I'm in practice, I'm hitting 100 hard, I'm going into full tackles and you're not. And I'm confused as to why you're not. And she's like, "Well, I know for my body, I can't practice that hard, but then also play that hard. Like, I've been a pro, for 7 years. I'm 27 years old. I can't do that anymore. That's not how my body works. That's not what my brain needs." And I was like, "Wait, there's another option? Like, you were thinking about this?" I go to the extra weight session. She doesn't. I assume she's lazy. I'm there. Why is she not? oh, well, she's actually understands that that's not what she emotionally needs right now. And that she needs to step away from soccer because she is getting burnt out and she is getting fizzled out. So she needs to just remove herself. And I think that people like me, your tryhards, we can be lonely, but we also can be judgmental. I will 100% own that. I have judged so many people in my life on first impressions, probably half of my college teammates, if I look back. And I truly think about that first impression and how I let that sit and put them into a box. Because I'm doing extra work. Why the heck isn't she? That's not fair. I work harder. I'm better. I want it more. Those are all things that have come into my mind because that's the way I'm wired. I'm doing this. Why aren't you? And I think I'm realizing now as a pro that I can act differently than every other girl on my roster, but we can have the same goals. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. So my question to you, Jordyn, is how do you get past that first impression? How do you actually take a second to go a bit deeper instead of me just saying, hey, Jordyn, you don't want to do the extra work. I don't care if you're burnt out. I don't care if you have school. Like soccer's clearly not that important to you. You're lazy. Put you in the box, close it, lock it up.
Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation, and I wish we had Justina on because I think she came into a program that was bottom out. They didn't have much to really strive for. They were tired. They weren't winning, and the way they were a party team or a party school. And she came in with this desire to work and this all-consuming, loving passion for the game that no one had seen. And this just, I, we've never seen someone like her, like someone who was all bought in and knew what she wanted for such a young age. And for me personally, like I was considered the hardest worker in any room I was in until I got to college. But my hard work was different because it was a mix between multiple sports. My hard work was you watch me go and play a basketball game where I laid it all out there and I packed up my bags while they're giving the pregame or the postgame speech, and then I'm running to my soccer practice and doing that. Like that's what my hard work looked like, which was very different than I think you were Justina's, where it was all bought in on soccer, personal trainings, very deliberate with what you were doing in a soccer aspect. I was a
Mm-hmm.
hardworking athlete. I don't know if I was a hardworking soccer player in that same way.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was this weird thing where all of a sudden I'm questioning my core beliefs that I was a hardworking person, that I was, resilient and disciplined and all of these things. And I think for me, it was hard to grasp because I'm looking at Justina and it looks so different, but it looks like the way we were always told it's supposed to look. She was an elite soccer player and she was all bought in the soccer aspect. And I think for a lot of people, what it began to look like was this teacher's pet almost, the suck up. Like
Yes.
she was in there having these meetings with the coaches, and I didn't even know that was an option to go do extra film or scout. Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you looking at? Like, what are you doing in there? What you're talking about the game, and I didn't know that was a part of the game. Like, I didn't even know there was numbers involved in the game. And I think a lot of that team, the way they were coached and the way they, had played for several years under the Tom and Tammy era were more similar to me. Even though they'd already been in college, I don't think they knew what it was supposed to look like or what any of this was going to do. And I think it was, and I'm speculating her, and I would love to have her come on and agree or disagree with me, but I'm sure it was lonely at times because none of us understood her. And I think misunderstanding in that aspect of what she was doing and why she was doing it wasn't to be a teacher's pet. It was so that she could be the best she could be. But we didn't understand that. And I think that it took time to get through that. It took time to know who she was as a person. And I think even now there's moments where I hang out with her and I look up to her. Like Justina is someone I look up to and I would love to be more like. She's so disciplined and I respect the hell out of her. And I think with that, there's moments where the way she goes about life seems so robotic and so disciplined that you forget she's human. And sometimes I have these conversations with her and, I call her, she'll just like rant or she'll be going through something or she's doing something. And in that moment, like you take a step back and you realize like, as crazy as it sounds, how human she is. That she is not this robot going through things, like how I think it takes some of those moments sometimes for you to take a step back and really realize it. I think for us, a level of maybe jealousy or resentment to the way she was going about things because we didn't understand it and we wanted it. We wanted the same goals and it looked so different, that path was a level of understanding that turned into respect with the way she just kept going with it. And more Justinas came to the team. Like I said, Kelly Severini is one of the hardest working players I've ever met in my entire life. And, they come into this program and I think they change your perception of what it is by having those conversations and being friends with them and making them human instead of these robots who are going through this path that is so insanely hard and difficult and straight line, disciplined with it. And it just, yeah, I think it takes time and it takes conversation to get through those original kind of judgments. And I think it took more time than probably is fair to them or that they would have liked to see as this program changed around and we learned what this is supposed to be and we learned about them and what the paths look like. But yeah, I would love to have her on and have her opinion and thoughts about this because this is a really, really interesting conversation and topic that, I didn't get prepped for. So I'm like trying to work through it now for all these thoughts, but it's something I haven't really thought that deeply of. You recognize that there's different aspects to the team, but how deep it goes and your experience versus mine, I'm sure is completely different. So it's really interesting to kind of dissect here.
Yeah, I mean, okay, first of all, you just hit on so many points. And that's what I think, like, I don't think, of course, you are like, oh, yeah, everyone on the team has different personalities. Oh, yeah, like, we need to embrace everyone's personalities. But I feel like that's as deep as the conversation typically goes. It's like, yes, we're different. That's great. Move forward. But I don't think you truly understand, like, how intricately different people are. And, like, I don't know, it might just sound so obvious, but like having these conversations has really opened my eyes to a lot of this. And like one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you on the podcast is because I think that this is a conversation that 15, 16-year-old Sam needed to hear. That frankly, when I was skipping a high school dance, I don't know, to like go miss and go to a soccer game, that the person that chose not to make that decision isn't inherently bad. Because I think it goes on different spectrums. First of all, how you just said people may have viewed Justina as a suck up or a teacher's pet. First of all, I have gotten that my entire life. And the reason that this conversation actually started is because we are getting a new coach. And we were talking about how we're going to act, what is a new coach? What is like that relationship like when you have a new coach? And one girl pointed her fingers at me and goes, oh, well, Sam's going to kiss. That was the statement. And so the fact that you said that, that was what everyone's like, well, Sam's a suck up. So of course, Sam's going to be that one. And I think for people like me, we get presented in this way of you're the suck up, you're entitled, you're this. But I think a lot of people have that perception without understanding why we're like that. And, obviously I feel like for some of these questions, you could be like, but why? But why? Like, why are you? And I feel like when you dig into that why, when you have those actual conversations of why I need to feel like everything in my life is so laid out and why I need to be so detailed. In so many ways, I think I'm envious of people like you that don't have to do it. And I think for me, like, yes, it might be the standard of what is proven and preached to be successful. That also being said, David Diani's literally texting me. Sorry.
See, like this is our point, Sam. Normal people don't do this. Leave that in.
Like when you understand the why of like, I don't think I would be a pro if I didn't be the try hard. I wouldn't be good at soccer. And I don't think I would have been successful in college. And that's not to say like being a pro is the only outlet or that's the only way to find success. But for me, that was my goal. And if I didn't do it this way, it wouldn't have happened for me. I also like, I don't succeed at soccer when I take that step back. Like you're the kind of person potentially, I don't want to read too much into you, that when we talked about it yesterday, like sometimes, or last week, like sometimes when you're feeling burnt out, you got to dig in more. Sometimes you got to know when to pull yourself out. When I'm going to practice and I'm not focused on practice and I'm a little bit, not focused, but like a little bit looser, I don't play good. I like being rigid. When I have a game plan, I need to know specifics. I am so black and white. I want to know everything about the person I'm defending. I want to know everything about the tactics and how we're going to break them down. I'm mathematically in my brain in soccer being like, they're playing in a 4-4-2. We're playing in a 4-3-2-1. Mathematically, that means that my pockets should be here and here, and I need to have this angle to do. Like, I am thinking through every decision. Whereas I look at a player like you, and you're a lot more flow and creative and rhythmic and like reading movements. I'm going to try this. It's not going to work. Okay, I'm going to try this. And I think there's something so special about that. And so this is where it just gets so interesting of like, you could not operate like me, but I also could never operate like you. Yet we're on the same team and we have the same goals and we have the same ambitions.
Yeah, I think a couple things. When people say there's different personalities on the team, I think the general thought is that you have introverts and you have extroverts. There's different personalities in the team where some people, are girly girls and some people are more tomboys. Like it goes very surface level with that. You don't think about how different they are in the way they handle day-to-day life and what drives them and the way they function as a human being and everything that they do, right? It goes very, very surface level to that statement. And I think the way, like, I keep using Justine as an example because I think she's the best one I've been able to see in my time as a collegiate player that she had to go through it, I think, a little bit to really change the perception of it. But Justina, the difference between a teacher's pet or a suck up to where she is now, where she is a leader and someone everyone has immense amount of respect for, and kind of examples how they go about things based off of her, where before my freshman, sophomore year, nobody was going in that coach's office. Now everyone does, because that's how, it works. Was you had to see her work hard on the field. She's not a teacher's pet. She's not playing because she's in the office all the time. She's playing because she worked harder than anyone and everyone else around her to get to that spot. And you had to see it and you had to really watch her have that sort of discipline in order to, I think, change that perception of her. But yeah, I agree. I try to learn almost as I've tried to do it your way and I failed miserably where I'm going into scout and I try to know all the details of it and it does not work. I'm overthinking in a game. I work best when there are zero thoughts up here. And I can walk off of a game going, I have no idea what just happened, but I felt good, and I think I learned the very basics of what their back line looks like, what my movement needs to be as a forward in terms of press and basic, I think goalie standards if we're shooting low and hard or if, they're bobbling balls. And that's it. That's the extent of my knowledge going into a scout because I play better off of flow and movement and kind of vibes, I guess, out there. I'm like, I don't know. There's a free space here. Let me run here and try it out. And I've tried it your way and I learned it doesn't work for me. And I think it took me a long time to realize that didn't mean I was lazy. It meant I was different than you. And I think I don't know if a deeper understanding about why you function that way would change the initial reaction because in order to have that conversation, you already need to be past that. If I think you're a teacher's pet or a tryhard or whatever, I don't know if I'm going to necessarily seek you out to have these deep conversations about why you function the way that you do. But I do think that once you get past that and you're trying to understand your teammates, the way they function or what they need, that yeah, absolutely. Like learning what drives people and what motivates them in order to be able to pull out the best from them and understand them more at all, I think is a huge part in order to like be the best team and the best teammates you can be and really work the best way you can off of each other. I don't know how you would necessarily go about that, and telling everyone the way that you function on a deeper level, but I'm sure that those conversations would help understand one better and understand what drives you in order to get rid of those preconceived notions of either laziness or teacher's pet or whatever it may be that you had thought about each other.
Right. I mean, so the thing is, like, we're humans. And when we meet people, the first thing we do is we judge impressions. We make, we put people in boxes. We see people a certain way. That is a natural tendency as a human. And I completely agree with you that there has to be some kind of figuring out how do we explain personality and motivations. I think you hit the nail on the head. When we hear like everyone on the team has a different personality, at first you're taught she likes to talk. She's more quiet. She is a girly girl. She's a tomboy, just like you said. And I think, when I got to college, we got a little deeper. Like I said, last year we talked about the Enneagram, and they're a type 8, so they're like more in control and they like control. They're a type 2, so they're a helper, whatever it is. And that started the conversation. I think that was a good place to start. But I'm realizing more and more that the conversation is so much deeper than that, because it hits what you just said. What drives you? What motivates you? What has your soccer journey been like? And what value do you place soccer in your life that really expresses? I think half the reason growing up people thought I was a tryhard was they didn't understand the value that soccer had on my life and the goals that my life had that were tied to my soccer. So when I was doing things that other people weren't doing, they didn't understand that that's because I had goals that they didn't have. And that doesn't make anyone wrong. That doesn't make anyone less than, but that just means that we have different aspirations. And I think that understanding of what different personality means, all the way down to a youth level, could have really changed my experiences growing up. Because I didn't have friends on my club team. I did not. I'll fully say it. And it took me a long time to have friends on my college team. And even a lot of people I look back in my college, I had a great experience at college. Don't get me wrong. Bluntly, I've talked to like 3 girls since graduating. And that's not bad. I'm not mad about that. But I'm realizing now about how many of my connections throughout college were also superficial. And I thought they were deep at the time. But I think it's because I did not have conversations like this. And I did not truly understand. And I didn't take the time to not judge them past my first impression as much as they didn't take that time for me. And it's just a very interesting place that I realize now looking back. I have put so many people in boxes, but people have also put me in a box that I don't know that they understand why I'm there. Or that because I'm there doesn't mean that they also need to be there. And that doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we all have the same goals and the aspirations. And it's really opened up my eyes to understanding, like, now that I have friends here that are so different from me, that I don't really know that I ever have had that before in my life.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'm hearing is that we're going to be best friends forever now.
Well, that.
But yeah, I do think it brings up a really interesting conversation, and part of it where at what level do we have to dig deeper to have this level of misunderstanding that then turns into judgment, right? And how do you get past that? Because at the end of the day, like, you made it through your club team and you made it through your college team and you worked just fine. You had success, but how much more successful do you think you could have been as a team, as a program? How much more efficient could you have been as a teammate if you knew what drive people to a point where you didn't have this level of misunderstanding, if you weren't judging each other? And it really is, I think, such an important conversation. And like, I got all these bells going off in my head now, like how I'm going to start having all these conversations with my teammates, because I think it is really, really important. And you talk about the levels of connection you have with your teammates and how you think you're going to be best friends with someone forever, and they turn out to, not be as close after graduation or things of that nature. I do think this is the start of deep conversation that would lead to kind of those deeper connections. And at the end of the day, talent speaks so highly as to how a program is going to perform. But I do think the difference between being great and being elite has nothing to do with technical ability. It has everything to do with like internal drive and motivation and the belief a team has that they are going to do everything they can for each other and to win, and just this mentality of it. And when you have people who understand each other fully and what their mentality is, and they're all bought into not only the team and the idea of winning, but bought into each other, I do think that's how you become elite. And I think these are really important conversations to have. And it's something that, again, you can identify that people have different identities or different characteristics, but to go this deep into it and what drives them, I think is really interesting conversation to have, and something that I think Michigan State is going to have to start implementing now that we're thinking about it and talking about it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on so many regards, and I'm happy that we got to discuss this. And like I said, this is something that I'm 23 years old. I'm realizing also this year I've played soccer for 20 years of my life, and which is terrifying to say. And I've had just so many different experiences, and as so many of other people, and I'm just now learning this. And who knows, I might have another life realization 6 months from now about all of this. But this is just, I don't know, it really opened my eyes to how people operate and why that's important for a team. So thank you for coming in. I know I really just threw you on a blindside that we were going to have a little chat about this, but I really think it was so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it even goes deeper to like your idea of when you texted me that we were gonna maybe talk about different personalities on the teams. In my head, I'm thinking like, all right, like what are different personalities on a team? Okay, like introvert, extrovert, you've got like the people who, are dancing and the people who are more quiet, like the very, very surface level things that come to my head when we're going to talk on our podcast about it. Which I think just goes to show like the point of all this, that we don't dig deeper into these thoughts or these conversations with it. So I'm glad you had this idea. I think this is a really interesting conversation and definitely something, like I said, that, as the bells and whistles go off in my head, that we're definitely going to have to start implementing at Michigan State, because I do think it is important conversations to have.
I love it. I love it. Well, speaking of Michigan State, what is on your slate? What is on the agenda this week for you guys?
Oh yeah, big one this week. Nice rivalry game. Our number one talked about team probably on the podcast with Michigan. We play them Saturday at 7. So no game, one game this week, no game Thursday, and then nice Saturday nighttime game. So it should be an amazing crowd. I'm really, really excited. It's always an amazing environment to be a part of and just kind of like sit there and take it all in after the games and be like, all these people showed up to watch us play. It's it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite games, and I think it's the highlight of my career probably last year. I had a nice little brace against them, so I'm hoping to maybe like replicate some things. I need some like good mojo going into it, or like, you know, calling on the soccer gods here. So
I love it. Well, we're sending all of the mojo your way. And my game of the week to watch is a matchup between Penn State and Rutgers. We've talked about how Rutgers has one of the top defenses in the country. They are in that top 4 chunk at the top of the Big Ten standings right now. And Penn State, of course, a ranked team, always competitive. So I feel like Penn State's offense versus Rutgers defense is definitely going to create a battle that I am excited to see the final result of.
absolutely. And at this point in the season, like you start looking at the chart. So we're hoping Penn State pulls out with the win here now.
Sounds fantastic. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of the big life. We couldn't do this without all of your love and support and little things. I'm still looking at applications for hobbies, working on them. So keep sending requests my way. I'll keep you updated in that journey as I navigate the hobbies. And as always, thank you for spending time with us on the big life.